In a quiet suburban neighborhood, lined with identical houses and manicured lawns, one home became the target of a shocking scheme. A black homeowner woke up one morning to discover that his property, his sanctuary, was listed for sale online, without his knowledge, without his consent. The culprit, not a hacker, not a stranger, but the very person meant to uphold community standards, the head of the HOA, a woman whose neighbors quietly called Karen. What she didn't know was that the man she chose to target wasn't just another homeowner. He was a seasoned real estate lawyer, and this time her cruelty would cost her everything. Set up 170, 350 words. The neighborhood looked picture perfect, the kind of place advertised in glossy brochures. Freshly painted fences, neatly trimmed hedges, and a homeowners association that promised order and harmony. For years whispers had circulated about the HOA president, a woman who carried herself with an air of authority and entitlement. Neighbors called her Karen, behind her back, a nickname that fit too well. She was the type who measured grass with a ruler, who knocked on doors if a trash bin lingered outside too long, and who seemed to thrive on control. When Jordan moved in, he expected none of this. To him the house was more than property. It was a hard-earned dream, a black professional who had worked tirelessly to build a successful career in real estate law. He wanted nothing more than peace, privacy, and a safe place to build his future. The house represented stability, achievement, and a place where he could finally exhale after years of long hours and relentless effort. But from the day he arrived, Karen watched. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of him unloading boxes, as if his very presence disrupted the image she wanted for the neighborhood. At first it was small things, complaints about the color of his curtains, notes slipped under his door about his car parked too far into the driveway, veiled comments about community standards. Jordan knew the type. He had dealt with people like her in boardrooms and in negotiations, those who underestimated him, dismissed him, or tried to put him in his place. But he had no idea just how far Karen was willing to go, because behind her smile and her clipboard of rules, she was planning something no one in the neighborhood had ever dared attempt before. Jordan tried to ignore the small infractions at first. A letter about his grass not being uniform enough, a complaint about his trash cans being visible from the street, even though others were not. He chalked it up to Karen being overzealous, another HOA president who took her title too seriously. But soon, it became clear that her attention wasn't equally applied. Other neighbors hosted noisy barbecues, left bicycles on their lawns, or painted their shutters off color without consequence. None received letters. None were threatened with fines. Only Jordan. The pattern was impossible to miss. It wasn't about rules. It was about him, about the color of his skin, and about Karen's belief that he didn't belong. Her tactics grew bolder. One week Jordan received a notice claiming he had unauthorized tenants living with him, though he lived alone. Another accused him of running a business out of his home, simply because clients occasionally dropped off documents for him to review. Each accusation was baseless, but each carried the weight of potential fines and escalating threats. Jordan, seasoned in real estate law, knew how to respond. He documented everything, saved every letter, and replied with precise legal clarity. Yet with every rebuttal, Karen's frustration only grew. He wasn't bending, wasn't intimidated, and that enraged her. Then came the breaking point. One Saturday morning, Jordan's phone buzzed with messages from friends and colleagues. Confused, he opened the links they sent and froze. There, on a popular real estate website, was his home, listed for sale. Photos of his living room, his kitchen, even his backyard were online for the world to see. The listing included his exact address, a description of the property, and a price tag he had never set. Jordan's heart pounded. His mind raced through the possibilities. Had his home been hacked? Was it a cruel prank? But as he scanned the details, one line stood out: contact the HOA for more information. His stomach dropped. It was Karen. She had crossed a line no one thought possible. By listing his home without permission, she wasn't just harassing him, she was attacking his very identity, his security, his livelihood, and the racial undertone was undeniable. To her, his success was an affront, his ownership of a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood something to be undermined. The violation was more than personal, it was dangerous. His private information was now public. Strangers could show up expecting tours, and the integrity of his career as a real estate lawyer was being tested in the most humiliating way imaginable. But Karen had underestimated him. She thought he was just another target, another homeowner who would be too shocked or too powerless to fight back. What she didn't realize was that Jordan wasn't only the rightful owner of the house, he was an expert in the very laws she had just trampled, and for the first time, Karen was about to face someone she couldn't intimidate. The following week, the HOA convened one of its regular meetings in the community clubhouse, a room where Karen usually held court, her voice carrying authority over the rows of folding chairs and neat stacks of agendas. She expected another uneventful evening. Another chance to lecture her neighbors about shrub heights and mailbox paint. But this time, the room was different. Whispers followed her as she entered. People had seen the fake listing, screenshots shared like wildfire across the neighborhood. They wanted answers. Jordan was already there, seated at the front, calm but unshakable. He had come not just as a homeowner, but as the lawyer she had underestimated. When the meeting opened, he stood and placed a thick folder on the table. Inside were printouts of the false listing, screenshots of messages directing inquiries to the HOA, and correspondence that traced back to Karen's involvement. Every page was proof. The room grew still as Jordan explained the gravity of what had been done. Creating a fraudulent property listing wasn't just harassment. It was identity theft, defamation, and a direct violation of state real estate law. It endangered his safety, his reputation, and the integrity of the entire community. His voice remained steady, professional, but underneath it burned a fire of righteous anger. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked at Karen, who tried to interrupt, but each time Jordan countered with precision, dismantling her excuses with the sharp clarity of legal truth. She sputtered about standards and miscommunication, but the evidence was undeniable. The woman who had built her authority on fear and rules now stood exposed as a liar and a manipulator. And then came the final blow. Jordan announced that he was filing both a civil lawsuit and an ethics complaint. Actions that could not only strip Karen of her HOA presidency but also cost her financially and legally. Gasps rippled through the room. For the first time, the power had shifted. Karen, pale and trembling, sat in silence as the neighbors she once ruled over began to murmur, not in her support, but in disbelief at what she had done. The queen of control had fallen, and the man she tried to erase had just proven he was stronger than her schemes. The days after the meeting felt different in the neighborhood. For years, Karen had been the unchallenged voice of the HOA, her authority woven into every rule, every letter, every whispered complaint. But now, her power was gone. She resigned under mounting pressure, her reputation in ruins, her threats silenced. The fraudulent listing had not only backfired, it had destroyed the image she worked so hard to project. Jordan meanwhile stood taller than ever. Though the ordeal had drained him, he knew he had won more than just a personal battle. By standing firm,
By refusing to be intimidated, he had shown his neighbors what resilience looked like in the face of racism and abuse. The same house Karen tried to strip from him became a symbol of his victory, a reminder that dignity cannot be sold, stolen, or erased. For many in the community, it was an awakening. They had watched Karen wield her power unfairly for years, but until Jordan stood up, no one had dared to challenge her. His courage gave others a voice, and whispers began to grow into conversations about accountability, fairness, and the quiet prejudices that often go unchecked in even the most polished neighborhoods. But the story was bigger than one HOA, one fraudulent listing, or one arrogant woman. It was about the deeper currents that flow beneath everyday life in America, about how racism doesn't always shout, it often whispers through paperwork, through policies, through rules applied unequally. It's in the way some are told they don't belong, even when they've earned every right to stand where they are. Jordan's victory was not just for himself, but for every person who has ever been told, subtly or openly, that they were out of place in a space they worked hard to claim. His fight reminded everyone that silence protects the oppressor, and that sometimes it only takes one voice, steady and unafraid, to shift the balance. As he returned to his quiet routines, mowing his lawn, checking his mail, waving at neighbors, there was a new respect in the air. The man Karen had tried to erase had become the man everyone admired, and his house, no longer a target, stood unshaken. The question that lingers is this: in your own community, if you saw injustice disguised as rules or standards, would you stay silent, or would you have the courage to stand as Jordan did?